Hello, Year 6 at South Baddesley School, and to your fantastic, amazing teacher, Mrs. Wilson. My name's Alistair Humphreys. I am the author of The Girl Who Rode the Ocean book. Oh, I should have got one down. That you've just been reading. Oh, I've got a sore back today. Strangely, I've got a sore back because last night I did a very long session on the rowing machine. Well, I did 1 hour and 15 minutes on the rowing machine, which is quite long for me these days. And then when I got off thinking, oh, I'm tired, I thought, this is ridiculous. I've rowed the Atlantic Ocean. I'm knackered after an hour. Anyway, I'm Alistair Humphreys. I wrote The Girl Who Rode the Ocean, which is a kind of sort of follow-on from The Boy Who Bite the World. I'm an adventurer. I cycled around the world, I rowed across the Atlantic, and I was inspired to do those adventures by reading books of adventure and travel, and I wrote a book about my adventure heroes as well. So I'm a big fan of adventure, and I'm a fan of books. So I'm really glad you sent me these questions. They're really good questions. I hope that you enjoyed the book. Right, I'm going to launch in. What is the best micro-adventure you have ever been on? Oh, best. Well, I did love getting some tractor inner tubes, the tubes that go inside tractor wheels, really big, blowing them up, drifting down a river with some friends, and then in the evening setting up camp on the riverbank and camping for the night. That was pretty wonderful. Question 2. Did you miss rowing after you finished rowing the Atlantic? That's a funny one. Is that a joke? No, I did not miss rowing after I finished rowing the Atlantic. I was very glad to stop rowing. 3,000 miles, 2 hours awake, 2 hours of sleep, 2 hours awake, 2 hours of sleep. I did not miss rowing at the end of it. Would you ever row another ocean? No, siree. No. What you need to read is about Sarah Ooten, who's a much braver adventurer than me. She rowed the Indian, the Atlantic and the Pacific. That's pretty tough. One ocean was enough for me though. 3. Have you noticed the world changing due to global warming on any of your adventures? Well, perhaps the most important thing I've noticed about the world changing is that you guys are the first people to ever ask me that question. And I hope it's a question that I get asked over and over and over again, but you guys are the first. So well done and thank you. And please will you fix the world that us adults are too lazy and selfish and greedy to bother changing. Please can you save it for us idiots. It's hard to notice the world changing because you need to be in one place and then go back to that one place later to see how it's changed. But when you're moving through on an adventure, you just sort of think that things are normal. So I wouldn't say that, but what I have noticed is that when we rode the Atlantic, there was so much plastic in the sea, and that didn't used to be the case. And also one small story is that just before we set off to row, we met this man who'd rowed the Atlantic the same route as us 40 years earlier, and he said he'd seen a shark nearly every day. We didn't see a single shark when we rowed the Atlantic because they've all been killed. So that was one sad change that we did notice. What inspired you to come up with the idea of a micro-adventure? I came up with the idea of micro-adventures because I loved big adventures, whether I was on the ocean, up in the Arctic, or in the empty quarter desert. Wherever I was, I loved adventures. And so that made me think, it doesn't matter where I go for the adventure, I enjoy it anywhere. So maybe I can do them anywhere. Maybe I can find the same sort of excitement and challenge anywhere, maybe even right here at home. And then I realised that most people who've got busy jobs and lives and families don't have the time to go on huge adventures, so how can I make them shorter? And adventures like rowing oceans are quite expensive. How can I make them cheaper? So I was trying to think of the things that stop us having adventures and then find ways round that, to find opportunities, not to complain about the problems. So that was what led me into the idea of finding short, simple, local adventures that all of us can do in all of our lives, wherever we happen to live. What is my top micro adventure you'd recommend for a Year 6 child living in Lymington? Wow. I would suggest you do what I've been doing for the last 2 years, which is 3 years actually, climb the same tree every single month for a year. And you will notice the seasons changing. It'll force you to get out in sunshine and rain at least once a month to do it. So go climb a tree once a month. If you can't climb trees, then I would suggest the thing I'm doing this year, which is to pay attention to the full moon and go out every full moon and just do something different outside. Maybe go for a walk under the full moon, or a bike ride, or just sit outside and have a hot chocolate. Just do something under the full moon each month. In class, as part of our science learning, we debated about whether rowing or sailing is the best way to sustainably cross an ocean. Which do you vote for and why? Well, that's a fantastic question. I will add an extra part to it though, in that you need to think how you're going to get back again. So I rowed the Atlantic, which is a very sustainable way to get there. We got the whole way across the Atlantic fueled by rice and noodles and porridge. 0 carbon really. But to come home again, we all jumped on a big aeroplane and flew home. So that was not good. And rowing, generally you can only row one direction across an ocean because of the wind and currents. Whereas on a sailing boat you could sail across and sail home again. So it's much better for crossing an ocean. What was your worst night at sea when you rowed the Atlantic? Well, Lucy in the book actually has far worse nights than me, because she capsizes. She has that horrific, terrifying storm. She capsizes. And luckily that never happened to me. When we actually rowed the Atlantic, we never capsized. Thank goodness, because it would have been terrifying. So but you know, this book would have been a bit boring if I said, thankfully, nothing scary happened, the end. So I had to sort of spice it up a bit. And to that, I turned to my friend Sarah, who had so many capsizes when she crossed the Pacific. So I had long chats with her about her experiences. So she's had far worse nights than me. My worst night was probably the first night when we did have really big wind, big waves, when we weren't yet used to it. So it was terrifying. We didn't know what we were doing. We were massively seasick. We weren't yet used to being awake all night, so we were so tired. We were missing our friends and family, so we were really sad. And we had thousands of miles to go, and the whole trip seemed so far. And we just felt trapped in this crazy thing, which it was too late to back out of. So that first night was absolutely horrible, horrible, horrible night. How many hours do you sleep? Well, we'd sleep for 2 hours, row for 2 hours, sleep for 2 hours, row for 2 hours, which kind of sounds like you get 24 hours sleep. But you bear in mind, actually in reality, you'd stop rowing and then you'd have to go into the cabin, take off your wet clothes, maybe have something to eat, do any little jobs, fix anything, lie down, try to go to sleep, take some while, and then people wake you up 10 minutes before, so you didn't really get more than an hour to an hour and a half, so within those 2 hours. But just the breaking up of it, 2 hours, that was the bit that was absolutely exhausting. It was pretty much like what it's like, you can ask your parents about this, say, how tiring was your life when I was a young baby? And they will tell you how tired they were. That's kind of like rowing the ocean. Why did you decide to become an author? I became an author for a few reasons. One, I love reading books. Reading adventure books, or reading any books, was what got me excited in adventure. I really enjoy reading books now. It teaches me so much. Don't tell your teacher, but I've learned so much more from reading books that I loved than I ever learned from just sitting in a classroom. So I love reading books that I enjoy and learning about stuff. So books encouraged me to go and do adventures. I then wanted to share my experiences with adventures, particularly with children. That was why I wrote The Boy Who Biked the World. That was my stories about cycling around the world, and to show that the world was a good, kind place and encouraging people to have adventures. So I wanted to do that. And I'm quite lazy. I didn't really want to get a proper job that involved me having to go to an office or a factory or turn up at somewhere and my boss would shout at me. And I actually, I quite like that I just work in this shed. I drink a lot of cups of tea, and as long as I get my book written, I can kind of do what I want. So if I now want to go and climb a tree for half an hour, I can, as long as I get my work done. So I really like the freedom of working for myself. Do you have any tips for becoming an author? Read, 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 and do some writing, and do interesting stuff. Do different, unusual things so that you then have interesting, unusual things to write about. Question 10. Have your adventures ever interfered with your life in a negative way? Wow. That is a big question. That's a big question. Have they interfered with my life in a negative way? Yes, they have. So I spent 4 years cycling around the world, which was brilliant. I loved it. But it did mean I didn't see my friends and family for 4 years. And so that was lonely and sad at times. It's also meant that now I've come home from cycling around the world, I sometimes find normal life really boring and really frustrating, and I just want to be off on adventures. So I find it really hard now to just accept normal life. And normal life can be brilliant. I hope that you are happy. I hope that your family are happy. I hope your teacher is happy, enjoying their job. Having a normal job and a normal family and a normal house is brilliant. And I really envy people who just love that stuff. But I think partly because I've spent time on oceans and in deserts and out in the wild places, I struggle a bit with normal life. So I love my adventures and I don't regret them at all, but I don't always feel that they've set me up for the easiest of lives. So I think adventures give you an interesting life, not necessarily the simplest or necessarily even the happiest of life. However, I don't want to end on a sad note, so I will say that I'm so grateful for the opportunities to have done my adventures. I've had such a brilliant time doing adventures, and I've loved writing the stories as well. And I hope you guys will have adventures, write stories and read stories too. Thank you very much for some fantastic questions, and good luck with all of your own adventures. Bye.